And I'm back with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and we want to talk globally here. We were just talking about China. What can you tell us about the leverage that we have with China? For example, will you continue to accept Chinese military companies like CATL and Hesai issuing IPOs out of Hong Kong involving U.S. firms, Wall Street loving to do those deals, making all this money, and then they're actually military companies? Who knows if they'll eventually turn their guns on America? I mean, isn't that a leverage point to take those stocks off of those exchanges and stop Wall Street from assisting?
Maria, we have a lot of leverage points with China, and obviously the IPO market is part of them. We've had 4 discussions with my Chinese counterpart, and we discussed the leverage at every one. We just recently met in Madrid. We'll be meeting again. Our trade deal, we've been doing a 90-day roll with them. That'll be coming off on November 10th. So we will be meeting again in October, in November. And look, we approach them with mutual respect. They're the second biggest economy in the world, but the United States has made it clear we have priorities, we have interest, and we are going to defend them.
Yeah, and what about Russia? How do you stop this war on Ukraine? We've talked about Russian sanctions. You also have sanctions in your portfolio. What more can you do to stop Russia in this war?
Well, Maria, it's really what more can the Europeans do? This war is in their backyard. It never would have started if President Trump had been president, but here we are now. He has been very clear that the U.S. is willing to do more, but the Europeans need to join us. President Trump unilaterally put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil, and I think we are going to see the Indians slowly wean themselves off of that. But Maria, the most perverse part of that, India is buying discounted Russian oil. Guess where the refined products are going? They're going back to Europe. So the Europeans are financing the war against them. But President Trump yesterday has said that he believes that President Putin has embarrassed himself in this war. It was supposed to be over in 3 or 5 days. In 3.5 years, they've made very little gains. The Ukrainian people have been very brave. The Russian army seems quite discombobulated, but now Putin has started making incursions, into the NATO borders.
Exactly.
So the one thing I can tell you is the U.S. is not going to get involved with troops or any of that. We will sell the Europeans weapons, and then the Europeans can pass them on to Ukraine. President Trump wants this war to end. He's said several times yesterday he thought it would be the easiest one to end. President Putin has made it clear that he just keeps escalating, and it's a race between the Ukraine military, the Russian economy, and we want our European allies to step up and focus on the sources of the revenues for the Russian economy, right, and it's oil. And Maria, just to be clear, this goes back to the original sin from President Trump's first term, where he told them, do not create Nord Stream 2.
Yeah.
And it was that reliance on Russian energy that got us here.
Well, look, we had President Nawrocki from Poland in the studio yesterday, and he said he would like to see American troops on the ground in Poland. And he said, yes, Russia is getting more aggressive. Does this war take a new spike upwards with drones into Poland and Romania?
Clearly, the Russians are testing the Europeans, and the European resolve needs to stiffen. They need to put everything on the table in terms of economic sanctions. That, as I told my European counterparts about 2 weeks ago, all I hear from you is that Putin wants to march into Warsaw. The one thing I'm sure of, Putin's not marching into Boston. He's not marching into Boston. So, but having said that, yeah, Poles are great allies. Before they had to be told to, they were already spending 5% of GDP.
Right.
Polish economy is one of the great success stories that since the wall came down. When the wall came down, the Polish economy, Ukraine economy were the same size. Polish economy is 3 times larger now. If the Ukraine economy were the size of the Polish economy, Ukraine would be financing their own war effort right now, and I doubt Putin would have come in.
Well, that is great. That's why we were really happy to have Nawrocki in the studio, because of the Polish economy as well. And by the way, he wants more F-35s. He's buying equipment from the United States, weapons, big time. I want to take your attention back to domestic issues and ask you about Anna Paulina Luna, because Anna Paulina Luna, the Florida Congresswoman, is urging you and the Treasury to investigate billionaire Neville Roy Singham and his ties to the CCP, and whether he's actually helping to fund Chinese-linked radical groups here in America. The Congresswoman joined me earlier on the program. Here's what she said. Watch this.
He actually has been the #1 funder of these violent riots. Not even just that, but a lot of the political division and discord that you're seeing in this country goes back to Singham. He obviously is a massive ally of the Communist Chinese Party. He's not a registered foreign agent, and so he needs to be investigated. Neville Singham is an open, self-declared Maoist. He absolutely does not like what this country stands for. He is working on behalf of the Chinese government to essentially break America.
Mr. Secretary, how will you respond to Anna Paulina Luna's letter to you?
Several responses. As you know, President Trump has declared Antifa a domestic terror organization, and we are going to follow the money on that. So that gives us a lot of latitude in terms of following the money. The other thing that we can do is, I'm not sure whether this fellow's
Neville Roy Singham?
Yes, whether he is operating through nonprofits. Nonprofit status is a privilege. It is a privilege, and you cannot...
Different tax treatment.
Right. So we will see what happens with that. But again, President Trump has declared Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, and anyone who is funding a domestic terrorist organization should know that you will be examined and you will be held accountable if you are funding or responsible for these riots, for this violence. This violence has to stop.
And President Trump said that he's going to look into Soros's funding operations as well.
I think everything is on the table. Anyone who is funding this violence, my message now, stop. But we are going to investigate where the money for this domestic terrorism is coming from.
Unbelievable what you have on your plate in this first 8 months.